spare time mowing grass. Just make sure you get
Read the big stuff first. Hey, Art. How you doing? Good.
Sounds like you got them.
We'll call the meeting to order and open the meeting with the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming to our meeting tonight. If you are addressing the commission at any time during the meeting, we ask that you step forward, use the microphone up here, and give your name and address before you start. Roll call, please.
Bert Boggs.
Here.
Dustin Epperson.
Here.
Robert Begaro.
Here.
Jerry McGowan.
Here.
Randall Ripley.
Here.
Ann Rogers. Here. Jerry Truex.
Here. Thank you. Move on into the old business section. We have several items that are from prior meetings that remain tabled, so we'll skip over those. Actually, all of the old business. Okay, so we move into the new business section, and the first item on the agenda is rezoning application ZON 19004. And this was submitted by Todd Barstow for the property at on Watkins Road.
Thank you, Mr. Boggs. Like you said, this is ZON 19-004. Applicant is Mr. Todd Barstow. Location is the unimproved property off of Watkins Road Southwest. Current acreage is 6.88 and is currently zoned RM for multifamily residential. The applicant is requesting a recommendation to approve a rezoning of the property from that RM and multifamily residential zoning to R87 medium low density residential pursuant to section 1217.02A1 of the Taskler Code. Take a look here at the area map. You can see the parcel outlined in yellow. Watkins Road to the west here, Broad Street crossing to the south. So, property itself, like I said, 6.88 acres overall. There's two sections of frontage on this lot. The north is 60.25 feet and the south is approximately 200 feet. The lot envelops three smaller single-family lots in Harrison Township. A little bit of zoning history. So, parcel was originally to be phase 7 of the Jefferson Meadows condominium development. That was never constructed, and that was actually approved in 2002. Here have a site plan showing the phase 7. There's two current zoning applications that are for this parcel. The first one's actually for the Board of Zoning Appeals. That was VA 19-002 for a lot split that fails to meet the minimum frontage requirements of the RM district. That was tabled by the Board of Zoning Appeals on February 11, 2019, and tabled again by the request of the applicant on March 11, 2019. There's also, you'll be familiar with TCOD-19-001 for the 42-unit apartment development, which was tabled by the Planning and Zoning Commission on March 6, 2019 to allow time for the applicant to complete a traffic impact study. So with all rezonings, following a recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Commission, the application will be considered by City Council for final approval of the rezoning request pursuant to section 1217.13. We came up with some comments for this. So Planning and Zoning staff had the following comment: future land use map designates this property as high density residential. Therefore, the proposed rezoning to medium low density residential or R87 would not be in line with the recommendations of the comprehensive plan. So pursuant to section 1229.05, every lot in the R87 district shall have a minimum lot width of 200 feet and a minimum lot area of not less than 2 acres or approximately 87,000 square feet. So the parcel in question conforms to these standards. Surrounding properties, we have zoned to the north as Harrison Township, and the Harrison Township zoning is AG for agriculture and B1 business district. It's currently a dog kennel. To the east is RM Multifamily Residential, is the Jefferson Meadows Condominium Complex. To the south is Zone GB General Business, however it's currently vacant. And to the west, we also have some more Harrison Township agricultural zoning, and also the Pataskala Village Single Family Residential, which is all single family homes. You can see sort of a graphic map showing the surrounding zoning, RM here, Jefferson Meadows, GB down here on the corner, Broad Street, and R7 over here in Barrington Ridge. Everything that's not colored is Harrison Township. Proposed modifications, we don't have any suggested modifications for the application, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Jack. Any commission members have questions for staff on the staff report? Okay, at this point then, I'll ask the applicant, Mr. Barstow, to step forward. And first, I'll need to swear you in. Do you swear that any testimony will give in this matter will be the whole truth, as you shall answer unto God?
Yes, sir, I do.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Todd Barstow. I live at 616 Monticello Court, Pataskala, Ohio. That's in the Jefferson Meadow condominium that Mr. Kretzman referred to earlier. The original plan, and I think I provided you a copy of that, and I think that was shown on the board. The original plan was to, I've been there for about 10 years. The original plan was to extend Richmond Drive, which is an east-west parallel to Broad Street, to go across there as a ravine, and then over into this acreage, and build approximately, I believe it was 6 more condo units, which are in the same style as the ones that are already in Jefferson Meadows. So it'd be 24 condo units. That obviously is not going to happen. I think that is the appropriate use in Mid-Ohio. When I purchased my condo, that was one of the questions that I know a lot of other purchasers had, is what's going to happen to this vacant land out here? And then there was other vacant land that they had started to develop and then hadn't. They finished that out, put 4 more condo units headed towards Broad Street. That was completed a couple of years ago. So one of the reasons I purchased my condo was that I was assured by Mid-Ohio that this was going to happen. Later on, I got elected to the Homeowners Association Board, and there was further discussion because this was still, Mid-Ohio was our property manager at the time, so they had a representative coming to our board meetings, and this was discussed. We're gonna finish this out, we're gonna complete this. Then our discussion was, well, we don't want traffic cutting through off Watkins, because Richmond Drive was gonna have a different name, I don't recall what it is, was gonna go all the way out to Watkins Road, north of Broad. Our concern on the board and our residents' concern was that people would be cutting through to get around the traffic light, or for whatever reason, just coming through. We didn't want that traffic. We're private roads, we maintain our own roads, and so we had discussed on the board gating each end, the Watkins Road end and the Broad Street end. We had a lengthy discussion about cost, about we'd have to get city approval, talk to the police department, fire department, so on and so on, about getting that taken care of. That never, I left the board and several years ago. So I don't know what the discussions have been since then. I take there haven't been any, because this planning hasn't happened. I can say this, I'm very disappointed in Mid-Ohio's decision to turn what was going to be an extension of our neighborhood into an apartment complex. I'm very disappointed that they would do that they would renege on what they had told the residents who purchased there that they were going to do, the representations that they had made. Very pleased that they finished out the portion on Monticello Court, which is on my street, beautiful condos, exactly the way the rest of the neighborhood looks. I'm very disappointed that they would do this to the residents. We think it's inappropriate on a number of reasons. I think I have some friends here with me that are going to talk a little bit about that in a minute, but we just think it's very inappropriate to have an apartment complex shoved right up against our neighborhood. We just don't think that is a good thing to do. So, if I have any questions, we ask the commission to approve my rezoning request. Be glad to answer any questions, of course.
Okay, thank you. Commission members, you have questions for Mr. Barstow? Ann?
I do. Thank you, Councilman Barstow. So I noticed, last month the applicant was Jason Heitmeyer, and so you have put in an application, and the owner is Mid-Ohio Development, like you said, but I wanted to know if they asked you to apply for this.
No,
Okay,
I did this under a provision of the code that allows a member of council to do this. I talked to the law director, BJ Kane, city administrator, before I did this, and consulted with them. And I did this on my own. I've heard nothing from Mid-Ohio since I filed my application.
okay. Do we have a letter from the law director?
He has not
Did you get
provided,
one?
he has not provided the planning and zoning department with a formal letter or anything.
Okay, I think we should probably have that. Just to be safe, knowing that this is all right for a city councilman to be involved in this type of thing, you know, with conflict of interest possibly. No offense,
No,
but,
I'm got thick skin.
have you done a traffic study?
No, I've not done a traffic study. Again, what I did on this was, once I was aware of Mr. Heitmeyer's application, obviously I saw it on the council agenda. I had neighbors and other folks that I know that live in that area contacting me about this. And so looking at ways that I could do to prevent this from happening in my neighborhood. And so, in talking to Mr. Fulton, looking at the code myself, I saw this code provision, and, well, I think I cited it in my application. It says who can apply for rezoning, member of council. It's one of the people who can do it. I certainly, Ms. Rogers, you want to talk to Mr. Zetz, obviously I have no objection to that. I will say this, I wouldn't have done this if Mr. Zetz had told me, no, you can't do this, or there's some sort of problem with this. So.
Okay,
But I appreciate the commission's desire to get that information. That's fantastic.
and have you talked to any other city council members concerning this?
Informally, I think I've talked to, I've talked to Mr. Hicken about it. And I've talked to Mr. Lee about it.
Okay.
Obviously, I can't talk any more than that because then we have a
Right.
sunshine law issue. So
Right,
those are two. I know definitely those two I've talked to about it.
okay. And, so what you were requesting is a lower density.
Yes. Well, I mean, the best of all possible worlds would be for Mid-Ohio to agree to do what they
Right.
said they were going to do in the beginning, which I relied on when I purchased the property. If I had known that they were gonna stick us with an apartment complex, I might not have purchased my unit. So, and that was another area of concern, was they had this build out that they had started to build. The housing market crashed, and there was this empty space where they had started to put the rest of the Monticello Court in. I know we were very concerned about what was going to happen there, because it's right up against the neighborhood. Now, they did complete that and did finish that out like 2 years ago, I think. So, that looks just like the rest of our neighborhoods. It's beautiful, so.
All right. Well, just from what you've said, my concern is that we would make sure that the law director, that we have it in writing, that the law director doesn't see a conflict of interest. So that's just I just feel like that would be, before we make any kind of decision, that we would have that. So I would recommend tabling it, but that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thanks. Rip?
Not at this time.
Thank you.
May come back later.
Okay. Rob?
Nothing right now.
Okay, thanks. One question, this is just under 7 acres, and what you're asking to have it rezoned to is a 2 acre minimum size. How would you foresee that being developed? As a one house, 2 houses?
2 houses, I think. Math's not my strong suit, sir, so I would say look at 2 houses, and I don't know anything. I'm not an expert in site planning and things like that, so I would assume a couple houses would be what you could put there, which, considering what the property surrounds, which is I believe those are 2 single-family homes in Harrison Township, that would certainly be appropriate. It's what else is already developed. The land's vacant, it's what else is already developed in that general area.
Okay, and then you also commented that the best solution would be for them to build out what they had originally proposed. Of course, if this is rezoned, they wouldn't be able to do that.
Well, I'm all ears as far as listening to what Mid-Ohio has
Dustin?
Question, if this is rezoned, Mid-Ohio could come back and request another rezoning back to RM, couldn't it?
They would have the opportunity to do that, and the final decision would go through council.
So it can just ping pong back and forth.
That was my question, so. No questions?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, I appreciate it.
Don't go too far, we might have follow-up questions later. Okay, we do have a number of speaker request forms, more coming in, it looks like. So I'm gonna ask the commission, would you feel that it's appropriate to have the 3-minute per person time limit that we had last time?
Yes.
Yes.
Any concern about that? Okay, and Jerry, you have your timer available
Yes,
for
sir.
that? Okay. Another general comment, many of you, I think, were here at the last month's meeting, and we had quite a bit of public comment. And as we go into the comment period here, we do ask that you don't have to repeat everything that was said before. First of all, it's all on record, and so for the other application, but I'm sure that the opinions are probably similar, so try to limit yourself. Remember, you got 3 minutes, so we'll go from there. First, kind of to Ann's point about the property owner, I believe we have a person who's representing them tonight. Connie Kleeman,
Yes,
I'll give you the first opportunity since that was brought up.
thank you.
Do you swear that any testimony you will give in this matter will be the whole truth, as you shall answer on the God?
I do. I represent property owner Jason Heitmeyer. I knew I have 3 minutes, but I have several things I need to
He
say.
doesn't own the property.
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry. You're fine.
Yes.
Does he own the property now?
Pardon me?
Does he now own the
No,
property?
but I'm representing Jason Heitmeyer, who I also had contacted your
Okay, that's good.
I'm here to say basically, do I need to be sworn in first?
You were, but we'll start the time
I haven't
now.
started
Oh,
yet.
okay,
We're
sorry.
not done.
You've already been sworn in.
Okay. I would like to start by first saying that the owners, to my knowledge, when I contacted the realtor, had not been notified by the council member of this application, and neither had Mr. Heitmeyer, who had already begun, as you know, his application for development of this property and had invested funds and has a distinct investment in this property. Second of all, the application where basically states that he's relying on the fact that he's a council member. The code and the charter of the city of Pataskala says there's 3 ways that a rezoning can be initiated. By the property owner, by this planning commission, the planning commission as a commission, not singular members, or be initiated by a council member. But that council member, as it states in this amendment, is this: initiating it and signing it. But the transfer of the ordinance is to be by the council. And the submittal of it to a public hearing is to be by the council, not a single member. In other words, can you imagine, and if any of these property owners could have woken up one day, gone out to their mailbox, got a notice that their property was being rezoned, how they would feel about their property rights being taken because a single council member decides, without deliberation with council whatsoever, at a formal open meeting, that he's decided that he's gonna rezone your property because he doesn't like how your house looks and he wants it to be a retail space. Or he has desired to also rezone the neighbor's house because there's a dog kennel and he doesn't want it there. Constitutional rights say that you have property rights. The council member should not, on his own, without deliberation with council, decide to initiate rezoning, not inform the owner, not inform the person who's actually expending money to do so. In addition to that, in regard to ethics, our charter states that the applicable ethics laws apply. The ethics laws in the state of Ohio state this: how should public officials and employees respond to conflicts of interest? When someone is in public service is confronted with a conflict of interest, he or she must completely abstain from making decisions about or influencing how the matter is resolved. Mr. Barstow has stated tonight he is here in a rezoning. He has a right to do it, he says, because he's a council member, but he's doing it because he's the neighbor and he has property there. And he's not getting next door what he thought he was going to get. Such abstention or recusal should include refraining from voting, discussing, reviewing, recommending, inspecting, investigating, or taking any other action, especially not initiating the rezoning. In addition, I'm going to read this. Our ethics law prohibits the official from participating with respect to land use, zoning, or other property matters before a public agency that affect land adjacent to or near his property, especially if the matters will result in a definite and direct benefit or detriment to the value of his property. For example, it says, if a neighbor of a city planning commission member has requested a zoning variance that, if granted, will increase or decrease the value of that commission member's property, the planning commission member is prohibited from even voting on the variance, let alone submitting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on, because we have so many, I'm going to swear in about 4 or 5 of you at a time, and then you can come up one at a time. So Drew Clark, Mark Van Buren, Brian Young. You don't need to come up just yet. And Gary Sunderman. Collectively, do you swear that any testimony you will give in this matter will be the whole truth, as you shall answer unto God?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, you're up first.
You need my name and address, is that right?
Yes.
So my name is Drew Clark. I'm at 174 Wintergreen Loop, Tasco, Ohio. That is Harrison Township in Beechwood Trails. I've made comments, I think, at most of the zoning meetings we've had, going back and forth about this. And we'll just make a few that are a little bit of a repeat here, but I would like to respond to the comments that were just made. Frankly, we've had a single developer decide to affect our way of life and our property value. And I'll tell you, it was a surprise to everybody. And so you have a swelling of residents here that are feeling the exact same thing. And a contrasting example is a development that's trying to go into Pataskala property off of Beechwood Trails behind Kroger. And that developer reached out, had a meeting with residents. That wasn't something that was necessarily required or mandated, so that we could get a better idea of what's going on. This development, the first we heard of it, was a zoning variance request to split the lot, and it took everybody by surprise. So if we're sharing pain, the pain is real. The developer put us in the exact same situation as they're stating that they are in. As far as the council member, you know, residents don't have a voice other than the council member. I can't go to a council member, but I am just as affected, if not more, living in Beechwood Trails. My neighbors are those 3 homes. My neighbor is the dog kennel. You know, Matt Barber's my neighbor. He's right across the street. We're all in Harrison Township. I am very grateful for Mr. Barstow's willingness to bring this forward to council. One of the first questions that we asked after the first meeting was, how can this get rezoned? I'm in support of the fact that multifamily is just not appropriate there. It's a leftover from the condos. So smashing a new development in there just doesn't work, especially with the wetlands behind where the parcel was trying to be split. You can't do full development. You're also affecting the quality of life for the folks. You know, I drove down here today, and there's, at the final property next to where those apartments are going in, there's kids riding up and down the driveway. With the amount of traffic that would be created there, that's something that I know they would not be feel safe doing. The nature of the neighborhood is homes, and you also have, and she couldn't be here tonight, but the dog issue. You know, it's whether this development happens or not, if you have a multifamily unit there, you're going to have complaints from the kennel. It's going to affect her business. She's been there for a long time. Or it'll affect the apartment complex or the multifamily unit. Folks won't want to live there because of that issue, and it could just go ahead and drive the rent down and the type of residence down. So, you know, I speak from that. Again, as a Harrison Township resident, but the Beechwood Trails folks, I mean, there's a lot of people here tonight, fully support this request to rezone that property and match the rest of the neighborhood, which is single-family homes. So I appreciate you taking a look at this and all of the intricacies that surround it, but I firmly believe that's what's best for the city on that lot.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Van Buren.
My name's Mark Van Buren, address is 4832 Kell Road at Sebring, Ohio, zip code 43025. Once again, thank you for letting me speak. The reason why I'm for the rezoning is in 2002, this was annexed out of Harrison Township. I'm a Harrison Township trustee and 18 ground leave. But when the developer is here in 2002, that's the development he proposed. That's what he said he was going to do. And at that time, there's only, I think, 24 units that could go in there. Actually, with the ravines and the wetlands in the back, there's probably less than that. That's what was told to, I don't know if anybody was here in 2002, but that's what that developer said. Now the developer decided he's not going to do it, and he wants to put over 40 units on that property. And also, if you look at the original plan, I know the condo association didn't want to take traffic through their condos that are there now, but at least it could have went that direction. That's a very busy intersection. And now with the new developer wants coming in, they want to put all that traffic, that intersection. I really have concerns about the business property south of there, not having a stub street, and it'll be a nightmare when somebody wants to develop businesses south of that. But we're here to talk about the rezoning and why it ought to be rezoned. And the bottom line is, the developer in 2002 said that's what he's going to do. And the people at that time spoke about that project, not about 42 or 44 or 40 multifamily 2 stories. That's what the neighborhood was told. That's what the people in Brittany Hills or across the street, that's what was told. When do we get to the point that we hold developers to a point where you say something, you're going to do it? And that's why I'm saying rezone this, because they don't want to do that for whatever reason. It may be a perfectly good, sound economic reason, but if they don't want to do what they said they're going to do, take it back. And at this point, you're not taking it back to ag. And if you want to give it back to Harrison Township, we'd be happy to take it. But you're not taking it back to ag. You're still giving them an opportunity to put residential. But residential will put less traffic on there, on Watkins Road, and it's going to affect that neighborhood a lot less than a bunch of 40 multifamily. If the developer didn't want to do condos, then he could have did a deed restriction or somehow told the new developer, you're only going to put 40 or 24 units on that property, because that's what Mid-Ohio said in 2002. I'm just asking you to make them stick to what they told council, what they told this board. Just because it was 17 years ago doesn't change the facts, because that's what the people in that area decided. And that's what I'm asking. They talk about investment that the new developer has in there. The old developer has a pretty good investment in that property anyway, because they went through all the engineering for 24 units. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
My name is Ryan Young. I live at 214 Aston Court, Barrington Ridge. When I got this notice in the mail, I was actually kind of excited. I felt that the people's voice was heard, and I thought that was a good resolution to the problem that presented itself with the apartment complex, with the amount of units, the amount of parking spots, the amount of traffic that would go through, just the cluster that it would bring upon Broad and Watkins there. And I think that's rezoning this to low density would fix that problem, because it would keep the traffic reasonable. It would eliminate a lot of the safety concerns, a lot of the traffic that would cut through. Barrington Ridge to go through the other outlet through Broad Street because of the amount of traffic that gets clustered right there during rush hour. And then I also thought that doing it that way would blend more with the community and the overall vision of Pataskala. I thought it would not only fix the problem with the traffic and the safety concerns, but also blend the community of what the people are really looking for. Home ownership to keep the property values steady and then on the increase rather than a high density apartment complex, which I believe would create a safety concern, a traffic concern, not to mention I think it would lead to decreasing of property value and a lot of people looking elsewhere. So I've read about it, I looked at it, and I was actually excited. I thought that we were going to come here today and everybody kind of rally in and you know, the people's voice was heard, but you know, as the young lady spoke here that's against it, I think overall this is what the people want, and I think overall that it's going to fix all the problems that presented itself and be a good resolution.
Thank you. Gary Sunderman.
My name is Gary Sunderman. I live at 652 Monticello Court in Jefferson Meadow Condos. And I just want to convey my support for a rezoning if the current owner of the property is not going to be held to what his original intent was. And if he is not going to be held to that, which at the last meeting I attended here, it sounded like nobody was going to make an effort to do that, then I fully support Mr. Barstow's, and I applaud Mr. Barstow for taking this interest. I realize there might be some difficulty there, but I would ask the zoning commission if and what recourse the residents have to make any recommendation or change for what goes in that property. I know it's the way it's zoned, it could be anything, but that's not very it's not very good for the residents there. That it could be something that's acceptable, or it could be something that's not acceptable, all in the same zoning cover. So I sent a letter to the owner of the property, Mid-Ohio, and I got a response. One line said, "We would be glad to forward your recommendations and your observations to the developer." So the owner has taken no consideration of the residents in the area. I think it's a matter of record, and I would hope that that record will stand, that you have had a lot of input from the local residents against what the developer wants to put in there. Nobody's against developing that property, but it just isn't a fit. What's proposed isn't a fit.
Right.
And as I read another decision that was made about a request that was denied, one of the remarks I heard from the, I'm not sure who it was, the zoning board, was that there was no support for the development, and that's why it was one reason it was turned down. There was a lot of support against it, and I haven't heard any support for it except from the developer for this property to be developed in the manner that it's desired. So, number one, what recourse do the residents have? What action do they have that they can take and request? Can we go to council and request that it be we have a councilman that has taken that step, and I just feel like the residents are not, they feel like they have no say in the matter because of a Zoom. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next group, excuse me, Tim Barrett, Todd Gentle, I believe it's Nancy Arledge, and Andy Walter. Do you swear that any testimony you will give in this matter will be the whole truth, as you shall answer unto God?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Barrett.
My name is Tim Barrett. I live at 575 Richmond Drive, tax code 43062, which is part of the Jefferson Meadow condominium group. And I'm going to begin by offering my apology to our first speaker. I interrupted her, and that was inappropriate and inconsiderate, so extend it to you. Thank you. There are several points, and at our last meeting, you heard concerns as far as schools, roads, and all those things, and I'm completely in agreement with that. My guess, I don't know, that the comprehensive plan, which granting this request would not be in line with, was probably based on the fact that it had been zoned the multifamily, more high density, and that was part of the comprehensive plan. I think you've heard plenty of testimony, but that certainly is not the nature and shape of the community that surrounds this parcel. I'd also say that in terms of the considerations that you look to when pondering whether or not to approve the proposal, all 8 of those are met, whereas in the previous request by Mr. Heitmeyer, those are not being met, not all of them. There were several questions. The staff actually has no reservations in terms of this request. I think it boils down to the reality that Mid-Ohio is looking now, rather than develop, to sell this, to make some money, which is part of business, and Mr. Heitmeyer wants to develop it, again, to make money. And I would think in terms of apartments, an ongoing stream, that could very well impact his bottom line and retirement and so forth, and I completely understand that. Businesses make money, businesses lose money. Mid-Ohio owns this, and Mr. Heitmeyer knew going in that this was not a done deal. So certainly he's invested money, I understand that. For them, it is absolutely business, and I get that. For us, all the surrounding residents, it's very personal. And for all of you who represent citizens of Pataskala, which we are, it's also a personal issue. So I ask that you consider those things, and I guess I'm a little taken back that Mr. Barstow's ethics were called into question at the beginning of this meeting. I've known Todd now for about 6 years. I've always found him to be very professional. I know of nothing in his character that would be called into question. And City Council, certainly, if you approve this, maybe with the stipulation that there be a letter from the law director in terms of no conflict of interest and so forth, that this is allowed, that they will consider the matter fully. It'll be fully brought out to them, and they'll make that determination. And I'm certain Mr. Barstow will recuse himself from that. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Bob Janelle. I'm here as the superintendent of the Southwest Licking Schools. I live at 83 Runkle Drive in Pataskala, Ohio, 43062. so I'm also very interested in what's going on. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I've spoken to you previously at last month's meeting, so I'll be a little more brief tonight. However, I felt it was important for the school's voice to be heard tonight, so that's the reason I'm here. Essentially, I'm here tonight to support any type of action or recommendation being made that will place limits on developments that allow for high-density housing to occur. High-density residential areas are a concern for schools as they have a tendency, when fully occupied, to produce higher numbers of students. And it's no secret that Southwest Licking Schools has been growing at a pace that has already required the district to go to the taxpayers to build additional schools to cope with the growing enrollment in our area. As a result, again, I'm here tonight to encourage the city of Pataskala to continue to support residential growth models that would limit the impact to our already overcrowded schools. So that's really all I have to say tonight. Thank you.
Okay, now, Nancy Arledge.
I'm Nancy Arledge. I live at 459 Middle Ground Road. We operate the stable at the end of Middle Ground Road and Beechwood Trails. I don't know what's left to say. Everybody's really said a lot. I feel for all of you now that Ms. Klima has brought to light the fact that most of you that sit behind there and your predecessors have tried to plan this town and can't really comment when it comes to your own backyard. I would like for everyone here to keep in mind the plan from way back 17 years ago. That area was never intended to be a high-density apartment complex. I think that the way it was zoned was to continue on to do the condos that were there. And that was enough, and that is enough. And I can't imagine if you guys are having to sit here and it was your backyard and you wouldn't even be able to stand here at this podium and say what you wanted to say. That just doesn't make sense to me. I love Pataskala. I have lived here all my life. Apartments down here fit because there's sidewalks and lighting and police. Apartments up there don't. They do not fit. They will be a problem. It will lower property values, I can guarantee it. It will drive down stuff, people won't want to live there. There's too much traffic, the dogs will bark, people won't want to live there, and what will be left is the people that will not be desirable neighbors. And they will drag down Pataskala and the type of living that we make and we have here in our town will suffer. There is a place for apartments, there's a place for high-density living, and there's a place for single-family homes. And Watkins Road is not the place for high density. Thank you.
Andy Walker.
Good evening, Andy Walter, 7899 Columbia Road. First, I want to say by addressing the commission, I'm in no way for this or against this. I just want to point out a couple things, and I think my colleague, Mr. Barstow, would agree that I usually show the other side of the coin. But I do want to comment that, and I'll echo a comment that was made. I'm not questioning Mr. Barstow's ethics in any way, shape, or form. Upon reading the code, two things came to light to me. And then I'll point out through the testimony that's been given, another issue has come to light that I find troubling. First, I believe that a council person who has potentially a personal interest in a zoning decision should not make application to further such interest. And through the testimony that was made that stated, quote unquote, I wouldn't have bought my condo there if I would have known this could happen, that to me gives me trouble. I believe that potentially another council person may very well bring this forward that would have no conflict, have no interest other than potentially what the code says is the proper reason, and that's public necessity, general welfare, and so forth. General provisions under 1217 tell you that's why this should be brought in front of you. The second issue I wanted to bring up, and this goes to Mr. Van Buren, who is a great trustee, thank you very much. As he has stated, this was zoned back in 2002. At that time, the zoning code allowed for this to be properly built, the condominiums. It also, if I've done my homework correctly, would allow for apartments. So knowledge that you have a zoning of a property adjacent to you that allows for that when you purchase, that's called due diligence. You buy for what you know is zoned adjacent to you. Lastly, I'd like to point out that it sounds like we have a permit already in front of your commission, and this has to do with the transportation overlay. And that transportation overlay alone being turned down, and I'm not saying it should be or shouldn't be. I haven't done any homework. I don't know anything from any of you. What evidence has been presented for that? Certainly haven't talked to Scott about that. But regardless, in the legal world, an issue is either ripe or not ripe. And at this point, there is something in front of you that could allow for apartments or could deny apartments. And to go and essentially leapfrog that discussion to rezone it, that, you know, ahead of that being decided, I think that would be also improper and could be something dangerous for the city to do. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Those were all the speaker request forms we had. Any comments or questions? Let's comments or questions, if you have, want to direct this toward the staff. If you're ready.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Commission members?
I did have one, and it was just brought up by Andy. There's already an application put forth, so even if we rezone this, that application's still going to go in and still going to come to table, correct?
Mhm.
Or has the right to come to the table as they're requesting?
The TCOD application, yes, the commission tabled that application until such time they could provide a traffic study and allowed city engineers to review that study. So it was tabled till that point, so once it's provided, arguably, it would have met the commission's requirements for tabling. At that point, it could be taken off the table.
And in terms of the traffic study, what's the time frame still on that?
I'm not aware of that at this point.
That's all I have right now.
Okay. And I believe what you were asking, just to clarify that regardless of the action on this one, the other one still stays on the
Still stays on the
agenda.
docket and will still come.
And then does the BZA also have something on the table for that property?
That's correct. BZA is considering the proposed lot split for the northern portion of the property because it would fail to meet the minimum frontage requirements or lot width requirements.
And the same would apply, I mean, that regardless of the action on this one, that would stay on their agenda
That's
until
correct.
such time, okay. Other questions? I guess I do have a couple related to the comprehensive plan. I know we said, or you have in the staff report, that this proposal does not meet the current comprehensive plan, and although the new comprehensive plan that's not approved yet, that, what's the proposed, or what's the recommendation on that? Just as background, we know we can't, since it's not approved, we can't really.
That's correct.
hear
At
that.
this point, and it's still very much in draft form, it's requested for medium density residential.
Thanks. The other questions for staff?
What recourse do we still have to, like, is that plan still valid? Is that something that they can be held to?
It's not still valid at this point because it was rezoned for multifamily, and this was actually a separate portion. For whatever reason, when this project was designed and rezoned and everything, they didn't require that the parcels be combined. Because then, moving forward, if phase 7 were never to come to fruition, it's much harder to sell off a piece of property that doesn't exist yet than one that already does. If this were a planned district, then that would be part of their plan, and any amendment to that plan would require them to amend the planned development district. So at this point, I don't see any way the city could require them to continue phase 7.
Any other questions for staff at this point?
I wondered if Scott might clarify the one homeowner that requested what their recourse was. I mean, I know we listen, we hear what all of you are saying, we really appreciate everyone coming and speaking. But if you wanted to clarify what homeowners can do as far as speaking with us, speaking with city council, and having their voices heard.
Well, typically, with the variance, for example, that's why we have the public hearing, so everyone can come out and voice their, pro or con, whichever way that may go, and then the board or commission can take that into consideration when they're making their decision. With a variance, there's a 30-day referendum period where anybody who feels aggrieved by the decision of the board can appeal that to the Court of Common Pleas. And the Transportation Corridor Overlay District, there's no mention of that in the code in terms of should that be approved, what the recourse would be. So probably need to consult with our law director based upon that if someone feels aggrieved by the decision of Planning and Zoning Commission, what process they would have to attempt to sway that decision, whether it be court or council, I don't know. As always, it's discussion with council, your representative for your ward or at large, to let you know your concerns and what they are. And typically, aside from that, this is why we have the open public forum for discussion with the boards and commission.
Okay, I just wanted that, thank you, I just thought that would be helpful. So, anyway, I still think we should table it, we should get the law director's written advice on this, and then we can proceed.
Okay. Well, on that point, do you feel that we would be able to get that from the law director, that written recommendation?
I should be able to. I will get in contact with him tomorrow and indicate that the planning commission has requested a formal decision on the rezoning application.
I mean, if the group as a whole decides to do that, that's.
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions for staff at this point? I want to open it up if you have questions for Mr. Barstow as the applicant. Would be a good time to bring those up. No? Okay. Then we'll go into deliberations, I guess, and just in general amongst ourselves, what comments or discussion would you have about this rezoning application? Again, as was pointed out, and we know that just for the benefit of the audience, this we're making a recommendation that would go to city council for their approval or for their action, let's say. Any discussion in general for us?
I think this is kind of strange territory. I don't know if you guys have experienced anything like this on the commission before. I think a lot of good points were made by Ms. Claim as well as Mr. Walther. Regardless of how I personally feel about what happens with the property, if there is a correct process, it should be followed so that, hypothetically, it goes one person's way or a group's way. You don't want that to ever come into question because it was done incorrectly and that call get reversed. So to make sure everything is done correctly, I don't know if we have enough information as the commission to make that decision. I'm no lawyer. I'm not that familiar with that part of the code, so it would be hard to want to push something forward that we don't have a very clear picture of. So I think it is kind of gray area. And as mentioned by the points by Mr. Walter and Ms. Clean, it seems like there is a route through commission to do this. But again, I don't know the correct steps, not being a lawyer anymore, that in depth on I'd say the zoning department would be. It almost might be, plus the TCOD that's on there, and the one that's in zoning appeals. just, which I think kinda goes to what Ann was talking about with the law director, but I think it's a little more in depth than that. So, it's just observations, thoughts, comments.
Thank you.
Very, very well said, Dustin. Again, I personally, I think whatever goes in there is not gonna be liked in the end, because the traffic's going to be the traffic that ends up coming out right there at Watkins, if that's the way it continues. As for the people, I mean, I think it has been heard, that's why we tabled it last time, and we're going to continue to listen. I definitely would like to know the process, since there's already an application on the table. What's the process that we should do? I think we need to do our due diligence and make sure that we're not just overstepping our boundaries with what's been done, with the previous application that we did.
And I think, I mean, to the comments of what goes in there, I think at this point, what goes in there is kind of not what this is about right now. I think what I'm saying is the process correct?
Is the process correct? Right.
So,
I think we have an issue with councilmen having personal investment. That's something you know.
And I do understand them having the right to speak, because it's their property too.
And property rights still are number one. Ownership.
Comments over here?
I agree that we need to get more on the legal side, figure out what's.
It doesn't matter if it's not legal.
I think we need more information.
I don't think it matters if it's legal or not. This is a huge conflict of interest. That's the biggest thing on the table.
in this particular case, I believe I agree with him.
If it was somebody
But
else,
if it came from a
maybe.
different council member that had no skin in the game,
Then yes.
it'd be a different,
Then we'd run
it'd be a different issue. And that's why I said I don't know quite what's the process. I still don't even know.
But for this one here, I think we have plenty of information to go.
You think that the
I-
law
I would
clearly
like to hear Mr.
states
Zett
that
say.
there is a conflict of interest? Because I'm confused whether or not, my understanding would be from what Ms. Klima said was that there's a process and we aren't sure if he went through the process correctly. So he does have a right to speak, if I'm correct in understanding what she said. He has a right, but there's a process and we're not sure if he went through the proper process.
Yeah, but he has personal, I mean, he's personally influenced by the decision. That's why he's here.
But he wouldn't be allowed to probably vote on it as a councilman.
Probably not.
Short fuse themselves.
And that's why even though I agree with you, I still think we could have some shady ground there in our understanding. But I think having the law director here to ask those questions would be beneficial.
It also bothers me that someone can come in and rezone the property.
I agree.
I mean,
That has no,
do we start that? I mean, that's,
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah, that's one of the concerns I have. It's not so much that I do or don't like what's proposed here, it's how it's being proposed.
and if I understood
and
Connie correctly, it sounded like it has to be the entire council.
Well, I think
Well-
that's that area where I'm not, like I was saying, I'm not sure on the process for that.
That's the, right, that's part of the fuzziness.
Yeah.
The gray area that we're not sure.
Right.
and if we took this to the law director, these are all the questions we would want to have clarified, all the issues we want clarified.
Right. What I started to say there a minute ago, I'm all about precedent, and I think kind of what Darren was saying, that, you know, if we just move ahead with this not knowing,
Right.
we're setting possibly or probably a precedent that it can happen any other time,
Mhm.
on anybody's property, and that's not necessarily a good thing, so.
So that's why I guess we need to decide whether this is to be tabled or say
let's just say we hear from the lawyer or from counsel, the law director, and it's okay. Does it change anybody's mind?
Well, at that point, then we would have to decide whether or not the original applicant is heard first, or the second applicant, correct?
No, it's still, I guess it's still, are we okay with someone else coming in and changing your zoning of your property? Doesn't matter who owns it, someone else. Doesn't matter if it's a corporation or person.
To that comment, I would say, if, like, in this particular case, somebody has a vested interest in it, correct, right? But if, as I stated earlier, if somebody else on council that had no vested interest in it, it seems like that is a course of action that the city allows, according to what I've heard. But absolutely to your point, with somebody that does have a vested interest, it does seem like a conflict.
I mean, if he didn't ask the homeowner or the property owner to represent them, it's kind of moot, isn't it? Because he doesn't have the right to, my understanding, he doesn't have the right to even come before us if he didn't ask the homeowner.
Well, I guess that's.
Is that what Connie was saying?
I guess I do have a question for Scott, if I could. In the text of which Ms. Klima brought to our table, can council just completely override it, or does it come back to us for approval, or how does that work?
So the way in 12-1702, initiation of zoning amendments, A1, or A says amendments to this code may be initiated in one of the following ways, and there's three. The first one says by a member of council pursuant to section 4.11A of the Charter of the City of Pataskala. So that would be the initiation, and then it would go through the prescribed process where it ultimately end up with 12-17-13 action by council. So the board, with any rezoning, would make a recommendation either up or down, and then it would go to council for the final decision.
So it still would come back to us for a yea or nay and then sent back to council?
So if it were tabled and then taken off the table at the May 1st meeting, the commission renders a decision, then it moves on to council, regardless of whether it's yea or nay.
What was the other option about council as a whole stated?
It doesn't mention council in a whole here in the amendment section that I see. It talks about a member of council, a motion by the Planning and Zoning Commission, or filing of a zoning amendment application by at least one owner of the property, agent, etc.
So does Mr. Barstow have a right to put in a request on behalf of the property owner without the property owner's permission?
The way it reads in section 12-1702A1, it would say a member of council. But again, this is a gray area and I'm not an attorney.
But this is, that, I guess it's semantics, but it would not be on behalf of the property owner because the property owner didn't consent to that.
So does that make it moot, this whole application? So there shouldn't even be a discussion.
Yep.
Shouldn't even be here. From my understanding, but I don't wanna break the law. You know.
I think that's what we're also.
I think that's what we're all trying to.
Based on what I heard, it says he can, as a member of council, do it according to the
Yes,
code.
that's right.
Now, I think the legal
But
news kind of gets into whether or not, and I think that would probably be an argument that the property owner would have to make against that. I don't think it's on us to kind of prove that or not. The point, I think this all goes back to there, and even if it does come down to it, do we want to set a precedent that a council member that does have a vested interest in it should be
Right.
the one doing it?
Well, I
Well, and
definitely
not
think
just the
there's a
council member,
conflict.
anybody.
Well, no, because it has to be.
Anybody.
Right.
according to
Correct.
the code, so it has to be a councilman.
Connie
So-
would like to speak.
Any councilman
I don't care
has
which
it.
council.
Right, exactly.
So,
I think it
yes.
comes down to the
Connie.
precedent of conflict of interest.
I don't know, Connie wants to
Well, I
answer
know
the
what-
question.
I know,
Yeah,
but
if
then we have
if
others that want
yeah,
to,
we'll have,
you're right.
we'll have everybody starting, so I don't know, what's the commission, which we open it up for specific comments again, or questions, or?
I am representing the applicant.
She is
I
representing
understand.
the
I
applicant,
understand.
so I mean, that's my only question there, is do we wanna hear from that, or what is our desire at this moment?
We
Because
did-
then we will have to open up to others too,
Well,
or unless we just wanna hear from the applicant,
it's the applicant or the property owner.
or the property owner.
Which I think we would be okay in doing that. We did have an opportunity for the applicant to speak again, and representative of the property owner. Anybody object to that? Okay, and again, well, go ahead, and Connie, you can come up and,
Do we
Understand
agree
this is
again,
not-
or is
this
this
is
just for
not the-
conversation?
I'm
this
only
is-
here
wait,
to
wait, just a
address
second,
your
please.
question on
Hold
what.
on, hold on.
Yes.
This is not official
Official.
legal or legal advice
Not,
from
right.
the law director. Keep that in mind.
I represent the property owner, not the
Correct.
city. In your ordinance of amendment, the way it is initiated is either by the planning commission, the property owner, or a member of council. After the initiation of the ordinance, the rezoning ordinance, your code states this, that that the next process is it comes to the planning commission. And how's that done? Upon referral of the proposed ordinance by council, or by the applicant being the owner bringing it here. By council, not the member, by council. Later it says, the public hearing by the planning and zoning commission. How does that happen? After adoption of their motion, transmittal of a proposed amendment from council, or a filing of the zoning amendment when it comes for public hearing. It's supposed to be from council. And I obviously am not your law director, but I'm reading what it says here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know, I'm thinking we do need specific direction if we're going to proceed on this. And again, I don't, my own personal view, that does not say that the application's good or bad. I'm not at that point. I need to understand, make sure we're doing it, or that the application's coming in the right process, and we're following the right process. Again, that's me.
So you're saying you don't believe we should move on this right now, that we should get more clarification, or what I'm saying?
I would say that for myself, yes.
Yeah, this is tangled enough that I think we could really use some time to think about it and then come back and discuss it again. I mean, I'd be very reluctant to go to a decision one way or the other right now.
And it's not meant as an affirmation or rejection of
No,
either
it-
application at this moment, just that we want to.
And I guess I said I wasn't making a judgment on the merits of this application, but it's also not a judgment on the one that we have on the table.
Right.
So regardless of the action on this one, because for me, it's not reflecting on the merits or lack of on the CCOD, the other application. Confusing enough?
I'll go along with that, get the process down, right? Make sure it's done.
And we feel we could get direction by the next meeting?
I feel pretty confident we can. I'll contact him tomorrow.
Okay. Need a motion to table, I guess.
I'll move that we table rezoning application ZON-19-0004 for more information from our law director until, should I put a deadline on it, or until the meeting on May
First?
first?
A second.
Thank you, Ann. Second. Any discussion on that motion? Roll call?
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
Mr. Epperson?
Yes.
Mr. Ripley?
Yes.
Mr. Boggs?
Yes.
Mr. Truax?
Yes.
Mr. Bigelow?
Yes.
Motion passes. Was see you on this topic in May. Okay, you want to take a recess? We have a 5-minute recess here. Okay, we're back in session now.
Took your eyes in high, yeah.
Yeah. All right, next on the agenda, under other, 6A, pre-application review for Mink Plan Development District.
So, you might remember this, we did, the intent was to go to a plan development district, and I think they did the informal presentation to council a couple months ago. That proposal along the corner of Mink and Broad had a commercial component, there were some apartments and patio homes and single-family homes. I think during our discussions with the developer, he's been reconsidering how he's gonna propose that or move through that. Originally, it was always gonna be a planned district, but, I found out recently that they might just go all to general business. So tonight, it's just kind of that same informal, what do you think kind of session. So with that, I'll turn it over. I think Ms. Kleem is representing Mr. Long, who is the would-be applicant.
Okay.
Thank you. Vision Development, we came in a couple times, I think, and talked about this corner, which was the northwest corner of Broad and Main, in the railroad track in the back, and they had looked at a component of doing planned district with mixed uses, residential, retail, and office. The properties all around it, to the west and well, actually to the east is AEP and M zone, and then to the south and to the west is actually general business. And it was my suggestion to them to take out the multifamily and take out the single family and just go for a straight zoning of general business so that we would be able to develop this property. We know there's been issues with multifamilies. We know there's been issues with having smaller lots, that type of thing. And this corner being a vital corner, close to the job-ready site, right on Broad Street, it seems like it would be a good site for business and offices and all the things that you can do in a general business, which includes office and that type of thing. And then if it was rezoned as a general business, for instance, if we had a retail company come in and says they wanted the very corner, we'd obviously have to come back here with our, not only our TCOD review, but we'd also, if we wanted to subdivide it, have to come back through for review of our subdivision plan. So there would still be those controls of how it would actually be broken up. But because we don't know exactly where any roads would go or whatever, we were going to seek, or would like to seek a general business zoning.
Okay, thanks. Comments? Commissioner, I'll just have
Sure.
it open.
I mean, I hate to not leave the provision for retail to already be in there, because I think that's part of that main corridor. I think it's, so why I love the general business, I hate to not have already the provision for retail, or in that front section area you were talking about?
It would be retail, general business is retail everything.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you could do,
We could do our retail uses, we could do our office uses,
okay.
but we just couldn't do our residential uses.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I thought you said you'd have to come back if.
I just meant for any plan approval, we'd have to come back, which would mean you'd also, if we're gonna do a straight zoning, we're not gonna have any roads shown or anything, we'd have to come back through to get those all approved.
Okay, but you wanna have it so it's open for,
Business uses
Business
and
uses.
office, yes.
How many acres are involved?
56, I believe.
56?
Yeah, there's a markup on your dais, I apologize I didn't mention that has the general site statistics, yes, sir.
No,
And,
that's a different one.
the map.
the houses and all that's included in all this, right? They're all gonna go, or?
Yeah,
would
we
they-
are not proposing residential anymore,
Okay, so
no
all the-
multifamily or single family.
No, it's a different one, Rick. You're looking at the one on Washington.
Oh, it's the one on.
Comprehensive plan states office, so looking at the general business district, just what's in the code, offices are allowed, grocery stores, restaurants, theaters, churches, it's pretty much the highest intensity, or highest intensity, but it allows the most potential uses, because if you do local business, it's more small scale. PRO is pretty much just offices, that general business includes a combination of offices, retail uses, restaurants, it's a vast array of what could potentially go there.
So would this make this the largest general business lot in the city, probably?
No.
I wouldn't think.
That's not
Aside from
developed.
like Kroger,
That's not developed.
that's not developed, it'd probably be near the top.
And if zone general business and then they decide to parcel it in separate spots, all those spots then would remain general business, right?
That's correct. So essentially, if we go through a time frame of how this would work, so let's say it goes through and it's rezoned to general business. So now that's general business on the map. They look into what they want to do, determine how we're going to parcel it out. There's probably going to have to be a road in through there. Then it would go through the subdivision process to plat it. So if there's an installation of the road or 6 or more lots being created, it has to go through the major subdivision process, which comes through planning commission. So after that, we have a road through. Let's say we have 6 parcels. Then if Burger King, just for example, wants to go in on the corner, then they'd have to come back to the TCOD for approval on parking, lighting, landscaping, architecture. So there's a multifaceted approval process for anything that would go there should it be rezoned general business.
I mean, based on what I see, it's not housing, so in my opinion, that's with some of the complaints and concerns that residents have had, but also I think it's a good location, honestly. Stuff's working this way. It's on a main thoroughfare.
We just
And
gotta
it-
get an exit on 70 and then we got an exit all the way
Right.
through.
Obviously, there'll be some infrastructure concerns depending on what goes in there, but that's all to come. What
Correct.
it sounds like through the TCOD. But also, I mean, it's another site for business, for tax money in the city and other things too, so. I don't see anything too wrong with it. My opinion.
Here.
Yeah, the prior version, you know, I had commented on the fact that there was multifamily along the railroad tracks, and, you know, we could get complaints later from people that trains are noisy and they vibrate, unless they're rail fans. But, so you wouldn't have that issue with general business. That'd be a positive. You probably wouldn't want to put a hotel there because the hotel's supposed to go across the street, right?
I'm not certain.
Little comment there. That, unfortunately, the northeast corner there was proposed as a hotel, and, you know, that obviously hasn't worked out yet.
Who's their attorney?
But yeah, I think it's okay. Had a comment?
Hey, as long as are bars allowed there and general business bars are allowed, right?
Pretty much everything.
And
The restaurant.
Restaurants without entertainment or drive-through facilities, in terms of just a bar, I would have to check the NAICS. So that's where we get into the hundreds of different items.
They still have
You
to
know-
apply for a liquor license and everything.
I'm quite
correct?
certain a bar would be, I'm sure you'd be able to have a liquor license. I don't know what specifically a bar would be.
Oh,
I don't mind a restaurant alcohol, but
Off the top of my head,
we
and I
have
probably have to
bars.
confirm this, but the Heritage Town Center, when they redid their plan for the commercial portion, they said all general business uses, and someone inquired about that the other day to say, could I put a bar in there, and it was not permitted. So it would have to have some food element. But so it would have to be a restaurant, there has to be food there, in terms of the specifics, in terms of how it's defined, but it seems like if you had, alcohol, so you'd have to have like a grill or make sandwiches or do something that there was a restaurant to it, that you could go in and the only reason for you going in there would be to have a beer. You could go in and say, I'm just gonna get a sandwich,
So
so
it'd have to be like a Rooster's or a Wingy Lizard or something.
essentially,
Wouldn't
yeah.
that be nice?
Yes.
So it would have to be more restaurant than bar.
Okay. Well then, sounds good. I think it's an appropriate spot, like you said.
yeah, I guess my weird sense of humor, that'd make a really nice 56-acre used car lot. Something we don't have. And maybe a car parts place in the
This
corner.
one will be a nice one.
That's definitely not intended,
No. We comment about how many we have here, so.
Yeah. and pizza plates.
But yeah, I think it seems reasonable to me.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time. I decided it'd be best that, since we did a shift, that to go through this first before we make out our format, but we will proceed with our application.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
It's been a lovely evening. This is my 60th birthday today.
Happy
Happy
birthday.
Now I'm gonna go home and eat cake.
He called you young lady. Did you
I like
hear that?
cake.
Pardon me?
Did you hear the guy call you young lady?
Yeah, I know. I was thought, does he know it's my birthday?
The guy that apologized
I
to
know.
you?
I thought this is great. My perfect. I'll never forget it.
That's perfect timing. Happy
Good night.
birthday. What a way to spend it.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, moving on to the agenda, number 7. Well, I guess was there any other?
There was one other
Yes.
thing. Today, we had notification that the BZA's decision of the proposed high school was overturned in the court,
Which proposed high school?
Licking Heights.
Okay.
As part of that decision, and they indicated that the findings of facts from the Board of Zoning Appeals were not adequate and were not actually facts at all. In conjunction with that, I think we're gonna try and get with the Board of Zoning Appeals to get our processes down to make sure we're dotting all our i's, crossing all our t's, so if there's ever an issue, we're sure the city did everything appropriately. With that, the city administrators also said maybe we should get planning commission. Granted, we don't do findings of fact as required with the BZA, but maybe we should get planning commission to have the law director come in and just say, here's how this stuff works, so if you render a decision, here's what you need to do. And right now, it's still abstract. I haven't had an opportunity to speak with them to say, what do I need to do to make this happen? What do we need to discuss? Those types of things. But depending upon how future applications go in terms of what we're getting in, it may have to be a special meeting because I don't want to do it, you know, after one of these and then spend another 2 hours on this. So it may have to be a special meeting to do that. But once I have more information, I'll let you know, and then moving from there to see, you know, if we have a meeting scheduled and there's no applications, then that'd be a good time to do it instead of doing a special meeting, but doesn't look like that's gonna happen for a while, so it might have to be a special meeting, but I'll keep everyone posted once more information is available.
Do you have any early read on other things that might be on the May agenda, new items that, or things that are coming off the table maybe?
Table, nothing that I know of. No, I think Sage Point is kind of in a holding pattern. I don't know what's happening with Border Place. It seems like once a month I get a call from somebody who's like, hey, I'm working on this. Can you give me some background? So we'll go through this whole thing and I'll explain here's what's going on, yada, yada, yada. And then like a month later, it's like that conversation never happened. And it's like Groundhog Day and it goes through the whole thing again. So it just keeps repeating. So I don't know where that one is, but that's been tabled since May of last year. So, again, we don't have any specific protocols on that, but it might be a time to say, it's been a year, guys, what do you want to do? But again, it's pleasure of the commission. The other one for the rezoning for the used, kind of the internet used car lot situation, at the last meeting we discussed and said, oh, we might want to do a use variance, and that's why they tabled it. Jack reached out to them and said, hey, the deadline's coming up. What do you guys want to do? And they said, we'll get back with you. I haven't heard them. So I don't know where that one stands. Did I get them all? Seems like there's one more. And then Jason Heitmeyer, we're waiting for the traffic study. Yeah. I don't know, because they were going to try and speed it up to get it to planning commission and say, oh, we can have the study by the meeting, but it's like, but that's great, but if we don't have time to review it and comment on it, you know, what's the point? So I think they're coming in arguably May, so they should be back potentially this one tonight, and then there's Summit, was it Hazelwood North? It was years ago. If you go north of Hazelwood, like there's a large wooded area. It's like Beechwood Trails and Hazelwood comes up to it, that we've been working with a developer who wants to put in 60 large lots.
He came out.
Yeah,
He did.
Yeah.
That's, that one, that's gone through a bunch of incarnations, but they're looking to come back with that. There was a lot of loose ends in terms of, since 4 of the 5 access points are coming through the township, who's maintaining the roads, who's plowing the roads, where we're getting water and sewer from, public or private, utilities, how we're getting that through there, and emergency services. So there was a lot of loose ends that we said, let's figure these out before we go. So that should be, the deadline's Friday. We should have that application by Friday. So it looks like at least one, probably at most 3.
Busy May.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Just generally, all those people that were here will be at this one too, because all 3 of those affected.
Mm-hmm.
Now, well, obviously with that crowd, we wanna make sure they're at the top of the agenda.
I don't disagree. So if we know that one of those is coming, we'll make sure that that goes to the top.
I wonder if that's a developer he was talking about, had a conversation, one resident said had a conversation with residents of the area.
Yeah, he did say
That-
that
that-
Beechwood.
Yeah.
That likely who he was alluding to, because they did go talk to the community and showed them their proposal. So it probably was them.
Hopefully we don't get a whole lot of back and forth on that.
Anything else under the other category? All right, moving on. Number 7, approval of the meeting minutes. I want to ask for a vote tonight on this because there's a section missing. But anybody who spots the section gets a few extra points, full applause. Now, actually, if you have any additions or corrections, now's a good time to mention them again. We won't ask for a vote because we do know one section that I'll reveal in a moment. Anybody have anything?
No,
All right.
sir.
The last item on our agenda, or, well, not the last item, but the item on our agenda last time about unsafe structures, that whole discussion that we passed, pass it on to council, that is not in the minutes. So,
Oh,
we'll get that updated and vote on it next time.
Very good.
Yeah. I just made a joke with Lisa that maybe, it's like Rosemary Wood and so many minutes of missing on the tape.
maybe the tape just died.
Yeah.
We have to hold our feet to the fire, don't we?
All right, anything else tonight?
No, sir.
No? Then, I guess I'll move that we adjourn.
Second.
That's seconded, thank you. That's- Roll call?
Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
Mr. McGowan?
Yes.
Mr. Epperson?
Yes.
Mr. Begarow?
Yes.
Mr. Boggs?
Yes.
Mr. Ripley?
Yes.
Mr. Truax?
Yes.
Motion passes, we're done.